Hashem, today's daf yomi is Zevachim daf Samach Daled, Zevachim 64. So we're going to start on Samach Daled, Amud Aleph 64a on the third line or the second line. The Mishnah had said that there were three things that were done on the southeast corner of the altar below, and there were three things that were done above. The three things that were done below are the Chatas ha'of, the bird offering, the sin offering of a bird, the Hagashos, where the Korban Mincha was brought to the point of the southeast corner, and the Shiari Adam, and the pouring of the blood on the altar. So the Gemara says, Chatas ha'of, how do we know the southeast corner served as the place for the sin offering of the bird? Hada Amran, because we said this earlier back in yesterday's daf. It said, by comparing it to the mincha of the sinner, ki chatas he, that it's like a sinner. So we see that just like the sin offering of the mincha is there, so too the sin offering of the bird. So hagashos, but how do we know that the mincha is there? How do we know that the hagasha of the mincha, that to bring it to the altar, is in the southeast corner? Because it says in the pasuk, it says El Pnei HaMizbeach. And earlier, the Brisa had said, earlier we had learned that from a different Brisa, but now the Gemara, from a different pasuk, but now the Gemara cites this pasuk. And yeah, sure.
Unless I'm reading in the wrong spot, the article suggests it's the southwest corner we're talking about here.
Yeah, that's of course what I'm talking about, the southwest corner. When I said southeast, that is incorrect. It's the southwest corner. Southeast corner is going to figure on later on in our daf yomi, in the same daf. Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, absolutely right. And Shiari Adam, and how do we know that the remnants of the blood were also poured on the southwest corner? Because the chsiv is called Damapar Yishpocha Yesoda Mizbeach. And it says all the blood was poured till the base of the Mizbeach, and we learn out that this was referring to the southwest corner, where there's only one amma. So that's where it was. So now the Gemara says, Milamawa, three things that happened above were the Nisoch HaMayim, the water libation, Vayayin, the wine, Va'ola Sa'of, and the O of the bird. Kishi Rabba b'Mizrach, when it was too much in the east. My time, what's the reason that the Ola Sa'of was originally done in the southeast corner? It goes back to what Jeff was pointing out, that we were talking about the southwest, but so Gemara says, what's the reason why the Ola Sa'of was originally done in the southeast corner? So Rabbi Yochanan Omer Shekrova mi Beis Hadeshin, because it was right next to the ashes. When the Kohen every morning, as we're about to say, will do the Trumas Hadesh, and he would take the ashes, go down from the altar and deposit it next to the southeast corner. And so right there was also where the parts of the bird of the Oas Oaf were thrown. So the Mora and the notes are the feathers and the crop. And how do we know this? Rabbi Yochanan Bore Kama Gadol Kochan Shel Kohanim. He says, come and see the strength of the Kohanim. She'incha Ka'al Ba'ofos Yoser Mimora V'notza. The feathers and the crop are the lightest thing in the bird. And Ba'amim Sha'kohen Zorkan Yoser Mi Shloshim Amma. And sometimes the Kohen throws them more than 30 amos. And Rashi says, the lighter the item, the harder it is to throw. It's very hard to throw a feather. So they bundled them together, but it was very hard to throw, but the Kohen was very strong. And how do we know that this is what happened, that he had to throw it more than 30 amos? The Tanan, Natal Machta Shalkasaf. How did the Trumas Hadesh, and this was the first avoda done every day, the Kohen took a silver shovel, Va'ol Rosh HaMizbeach. He went up the altar, Pina Esa Gecholim. He moved the coals to the side, Elach Ve'elach, V'chita Min HaMuchalos HaPnimios. And he took a scoopful from the innermost coals, the yored, and he would go back down the altar. He gila ritzpah. He would reach the floor. Machzir panav kapei tzafon. He would turn around. V'holech u'mizracho, and then he would go to the east. Shel kevesh ke'eser amos, and he would go to the east of the kevesh, which would be basically around 10 amos. At 10 amos, and after he walked around 10 amos, shabar segachol magabe ritzpah. He would collect the coals on the he would collect the coals in the floor. So, by the way, when he says it's 10 amos from the end of the ramp, but the ramp was 5 amos from the end of the altar, so it's really only 5 amos from the end of the altar, and it's not really 5 amos from the end of the altar because it's really 2 amos from the end of the altar because the altar itself was 32 amos wide, and the ramp was 16 amos. So if he walks down from the middle of the ramp, that would be 8 amos to one side. But let's say from the end of the ramp, it would be so if he walked 10 amos, then 8 of it would be overlapping with the altar. So it'd be 2 amos away from the edge of the altar. And then what he would do, and then Sabas Gachal Magabi Aritzba, then he would collect all the coals on the floor. Rachok min hakevesh shlosha tfachim, that it had to be at least 3 tfachim from the edge of the ramp. So we don't want the walls of the ramp to get dirty, says the Ravid. And then what would he do? Makom shenosnim mora v'nutza dishon mizbeach hapnimi v'amenorah. And that's where they would put all of these things: the crop and the feathers, and the ashes, and of also the inner altar, and also which and the menorah. So the initial Trumas Hadeshin was of the outer altar, but also every day they would take the ashes from the menorah and from the inner altar. So then the Gemara asked the question, actually, this is more than 31. And Rashi didn't know that the area of a triangle, he didn't know about the hypotenuse that is A squared plus B squared equals C squared. But he knew how to calculate that even without that. And Rashi calculates that if you go to the easternmost point of the altar and you throw it to that point, you're talking about 21 amos. But if you go from the south and go down, you have 23 amos. And if you combine them, you're going to get 31 amos, more than 31 amos. So the Gemara says, no, Malkam Gavri Lochash, if he didn't count the place of the person, and so therefore that wasn't calculated as part of it. Okay, so then we say, whoever would go up the ramp would go up on the right side and then go around it until they get to the left side, except for these 3, the Nisuch HaMayim, the Nisuch HaYayin, and the Olas HaOf. My time, and what's the reason why that they would go, the Nisuch HaMayim and Yayin would go straight to the left? Rabbi Yochanan Nistachem, when it comes to the wine, we're worried Shema Yisashnu. Worried that the wine will be smoky, and then it would be improper to. It would be a less of a distinguished wine. It would be improper to throw it as a libation. The Olas HaOf, and what's the problem with the Olas HaOf being taken this way? Mar says we're concerned Shema Tamos Ba'ashan. We're worried that the Olas HaOf would die from smoke if he walked all around the altar. But didn't we have a contradictory brisa? Let's say he comes to make a circuit on the altar. Where does he start from? He carrying to Romis, Mizrachas from the southeast. Then he goes Mizrachat Tzifonis, he goes to the northeast, Tzifonis Maravas to the west, Maravas Dromas, then to the southwest. And then they give him the wine as libation. And so the implication is he's not carrying the wine all the way around, but they give it to him when he gets there. So this contradicts the idea that he walks immediately to the left. So the Gemara says, I'm a Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, hakafa beregel. Rabbi Yochanan says, hakafa beregel, meaning to say, this hakafa, which he was walking around, was not with the wine. He was just walking around on the foot. And when he got there, they would give him the wine. Rashi explains that whoever went up to do the libation went up specifically for this task, because in the temple they divided up the different tasks. and so therefore, uh, he went up directly to the left to do his service. And this is different from the Kohen Gadol when he would do it, which is what we're talking about, that he would do it without any lottery. And about him, it's referring to when it says he goes up to do all the things together and to bring up the parts of the offering. Since he went up to do other parts, therefore he goes around the altar, and only afterwards do they give him the wine. And so therefore it's not a contradiction. So and indeed, Rava says, Daikanami, indeed, we can infer this to Katani. It says we give him the wine as a libation, and we don't say just pour the wine. We see from here that the wine was not in his hands when he got to that corner, and when he walked around, he was just walking around without the wine. Tana Rabbanan, so Kol Olam is Beach Owen Derech Yamin. Excuse me, whoever goes up to the altar walks up by the right. V'yordan derech small, and you walk down the left side of the ramp. Owen derech mizrach, v'yordan derech marav. You walk up the eastern side and you go down the western side. Chutz min ha'ol shlosh dvar ma'ololu, except if you go for these three things. Shalom derech marav. So you had to be aware which time of the day it was, because those people went up the west. V'yordan derech marav, and they go down that way. Owen derech yamin, v'yordan derech yamin. And then we say in the Brisa, it says, Owen derech yamin, v'yordan derech yamin. Those who go up, who do for these three things, go up on the right side and go down on the right side. The Gemara says, what are you talking about? Derech yamin, they're not going down on the right side. They're not going up on the right side. They're going up on the west, which is the left side. So Derech Smochu, that's the left. So the Gemara gives two answers to this question. I'm Ravina Tani Smol. First is just change the text. They're Oled Derech Smol, not Derech Yamin. And the second answer is Rava says, no, Yamin de Mizbeach. No, reorient yourself. They're going up the right from the altar's perspective. The altar's right. My small de Gavra. And when in the earlier part of the Bride said, what is it referred to? When it refers to the left, that's the left of the person. So it changes perspectives in the middle of the Mishnah. So the Gemara says in the middle of the Brisa. That doesn't make that's a challenging concept. And this you should keep the whole perspective the whole way through. Otherwise, you're going to confuse the poor people who want to do the daf yomi. The Gemara says kasha. It's difficult. Yeah, that's a difficulty. So now we're going to come to the discussion of the chatas ha'of keitzad hinasis. How was the chatas ha'of done? So we take out the next few words. Different. It's Gears issue. Hayamoik es rosha mimo arpo. So the chatas ha'of, he would be moik. He would kill the animal from the back of the neck. Ve'eno mavdil, and he would not separate the head. Rashi says this means he wouldn't cut through both the trachea and the esophagus. By a fowl, you only have to do one, and so therefore he wouldn't be allowed to do two, even though by a regular, let's say chicken that you kill, you outside of Beis Hamikdash, you only have to do one by a fowl, but you're allowed to do both, and maybe you should even do both. But here according to Rashi, he only did one of the two, and if he did both, he would be apostle. And Ram says no, it means you can't separate the egg completely. Midama, and then he would sprinkle from the blood of the bird. He would just basically wave the bird by sprinkling it and without a utensil. Al Kir Mizbeach, on the wall of the altar on the bottom of the southwest corner. Shiari Adam, and the remnants of that blood, he would squeeze against the base. And the altar didn't get any part of the flesh of this bird, ela dama, only the blood. The Kohanim ate everything. Tan Rabbanan, the Gemara says, it says in the Brisa, says, it says in the Pasuk, v'izami dama chatas. And you sprinkle from the blood of the sin offering, the gufa chatas. from the body of the bird and not from utensil. Okay, what do you do? Oches barosh uvaguf. You hold the body and the head umaza and you sprinkle it. Al kira mizbeach on the wall of the altar. V'lo kira kavesh, but not on the wall of the ramp. V'lo kira heichal, not on the wall of the sanctuary. V'lo kira ulam, and not on the wall of the foyer. It has to be on the wall of the altar. The which wall are we talking about? Which wall of the altar? Zekira tachton. This is the lower wall, meaning to say the bottom half of the altar. Oh, enu ela kira elyon. Maybe it's the upper half. V'dinu. We can make a logical argument. Uma behema shel ola salamata chata salamal. If an animal, where if you bring an ola offering, that blood has to be applied on the lower part, but if you bring a chatas, that blood is applied on the upper part of the altar. Oaf shola salamal, a bird whose blood is applied above, if it's an ola. Eno din shechatas salamal. For sure, it's an offering should be above. Tamalomar, no. The rest of the blood you shall squeeze from the bird onto the base. Meaning to say, the blood is sprinkled on the wall, where it could drip down to the base. And that's the lower part of the wall. Gemara says, but why? Why do we have to say that? It's possible that you do it both. You should do the sprinkling of the blood above, and then you squeeze it below. So Amarava miksiv yimatze. Does it say it shall be squeezed? Yimatze ksiv the memela masha. Meaning to say that it will come on its own, so that from the initial sprinkling, it'll also go down. Amarav Zucher Bar Tuvi Amarav Ketzad Mokin Chatas Ha'of. How does the malika of the Chatas Ha'of, the malika is the killing. There's a dispute is if it had to take place on the top of the altar or if it was allowed to also take place on the top of the altar. But now we're going to go through the actual manner in which the bird was killed. Ketzad Mokin Chatas Ha'of. How was this malika done? Is it also a discussion? Is the malika considered like a shchita, or is it considered like an avela that's the way the kohanim are allowed to eat it, or is it considered for this animal? It's called a shchita. That's what's called a lamdish discussion. The Kohen holds the wings of the bird in his two fingers between the middle finger and his index finger. So he holds the bird in two fingers. He holds that. He holds the wings in his two fingers. And then umoseach tzavara arochav godlo. He stretches out the neck of the bird on the back of his, or on the width of his hand, meaning to say umolka, and then he presses it through. It basically is going like a hold like this, and the head of the bird is coming here, and then he basically is going to stick through his finger through it. The Masnisa Tana, there's a different version of this, and the different version of this is Tzipra Milabar. The bird he holds with from the back, meaning to say on the back of the hand, or the palm, really, and its neck above the face, and oches gapav b'shtei etzbos, and then he holds the wings in two fingers, ushnei raglayim b'shtei etzbos, and then he holds the two fingers, the two legs of the bird in his two fingers, between the ring and the pinky, umosech tzavar al rochav b'shtei etzbos, and then he puts out the neck over the width of the other two fingers, the pointer and the middle one, stretches it out, umolek, and he sticks his thumb through and kills it through the back. V'zui avoda kasha shebemikdash, and this is considered the most difficult avoda in the temple. Why is it so difficult? There's again a dispute here. Rambam says because it was painful. He's breaking the bones of the. He's breaking the pipes of the bird with his thumb, and that's painful. Alternatively, it's difficult because um, that he has to do it all with one hand, and it's very challenging. And Gemara says, Zui v'suo, is this the most difficult? What about the kamitza, the chafina? The kamitza is very difficult. Menachos, we learn about the service of the kamitza, where he has to scoop it up with the three fingers, and afterwards he has to make it completely level with his thumb and his pinky. And that's supposed to be very difficult. And then there's the chafina, which is on Yom Kippur, that on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol would bring a special incense into the Holy of Holies, and he would bring the incense when it was in a spoon in his left hand, and in his right hand was the hot pan of the coals. And when he entered into the Holy of Holies, he would put the pan with the coals between the two poles of the ark, and then he would take the ketores with the spoon in it, and he would pour it into his cupped hands. And then what he would do is he would pour it from his cupped hands onto the coals in the pan. And how would he do this chafina? So the Braisa in Yoma tells us there was either two ways. Either he would hold, because he had to pour it from the spoon into his two hands together. So how would he do that? So either he would hold the spoon on the tips of the fingers and skip and put and pour it in, or else he would hold the spoon between his teeth and he would go like that and put it down until it came until he was able to pour it in. And the Gemara in Yoma tells us that if any of it dropped, he was going to get death from heaven. So that was tricky. So this is one of the most difficult, challenging things to do in the temple. Now up to the carbon olas ha'of, the o of the bird. Olas ha'of keitzad, not this. How is the o of the bird done? Ola kevesh, the Kohen go up the ramp, and the bird was in his hand. Upan ala sovev, and he would go to the ledge. When he got to the southwest, to the southeast corner, he would do the muliko, ma'avdil, do the havdalah, the separation, umitza, as dam al mizbeach, and then he would squeeze the bird against the wall of the mizbeach. Not a rosh. Then he took the head, v'hikif beis mulikaso, and then he would take the head itself and bring it to the altar's wall and squeeze it. Usifago b'melach, and then he would pour salt on it. Uzirako gabeishim, and pour it onto the fire. Balo laguf, then he would take the body. So he would remove the crop and the feathers. And the innards. Because it says in the Torah by he has to throw it. So he has to throw it towards the pile of ashes. Let's say he cut it into two, but he didn't separate it completely. Or hivdil, or kosher. Or if he separated it completely, it would be kosher. Sof go b'melch, and then he would pour salt on it. And put on the fire. Let's say he didn't remove the crop and the feathers and the innards, or he didn't pour salt on them. Everything that was burnt to the altar, the oil was supposed to have salt. Hold on one second. So every carbon that before was put on the fire had to have salt on it. Let's say he didn't do that. Anything that he changed after he first squeezed out the blood, it's kashera. It will still be kosher. Hivdil b'chatas. Let's say he separated the chatas. He cut the two pipes, according to Rashi. V'lo hivdil ba'oah, not the oah. Also, it's disqualified. Mitzah dama rosh, well, mitzah dama guf. Let's say he squeezed the blood of the head, but not the body. Psula, it's disqualified. Mitzah dama guf. Well, mitzadam arosh, let's say squeeze the blood of the body, but not the blood of the head. Keshera, in all these cases, if you did the blood of the body, but not the blood of the head, it will be kosher. Because even though it's a mitzvah to squeeze the blood of the head, if you didn't do it, it's not disqualified. Now we're remembering the first Mishnah in Zevachim. Let's say you do the chatas of the oath with the wrong intent, or mitzah dama shelo lishma, or you squeezed it with the wrong intent, lishma v'shelo lishma, or shelo lishma lishma. In all these cases, by a chatas, it's psua, it's disqualified. By olas oath, by the ola, it's kesher if you had the wrong intent. To bavad shelo also a baal m'shem chover, but you have not fulfilled the obligation of the owner, and he has to redo it. Echad chatas oath, echad olas oath, shemolkan v'shemitzas daman. Let's say you have a chatas oath or olas oath, which you did the malik on them, or you squeezed their blood. And now we're reminded of Pigel. To do it beyond the place. Also, it's disqualified and ain't bone kares. But if it's chutzlas mana, when it's beyond the proper time, Pigel v'chayevin will have kares, and you're liable for kares. So as long as it is brought properly. And what is it to being brought properly? That's for tomorrow's daf. We'll get into that in tomorrow's daf. This is the discussion of today's daf. Shekach to everyone.